IT, and then later was moved over to lead the Economic Development Administration in Commerce. I was the Assistant Secretary there, requiring Senate confirmation. And then the last year of the Trump administration, this would have been 2020 through early 2021, I served as the Deputy Chief of Staff working with Mark Meadows. And so I served there 11 months. I was only 10 steps away from the Oval Office, and I served on the Coronavirus Task Force. I was the liaison with the 2020 Census Bureau in the White House. So it was a very interesting times, and I really enjoyed my association with President Trump.
Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of The App. Has nothing to do with the internet, has nothing to do with computers. The app in this case stands for ARKLATEX People and Politics. And what you just saw there was a clip from a previous interview I did with State Treasurer John Fleming. We're happy to have Treasurer Fleming with us today. John, how are you?
Hi, Jeff. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate you doing this with us. You're adding to another of the long line of illustrious guests we've had so far on the app. Appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you.
We heard you talking about some of the background that you've had there in that clip from a previous interview, and I mean it's incredibly impressive. When I first came here 10 years ago, you were the congressman in District 4.
Yes.
That's obviously changed a whole lot since that time, but give us more details on all the stuff that we just heard, because your background's amazing.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for that. My really goal in life was to serve people, and I chose initially to serve people, and I did so for many years as a family physician, board certified, residency trained, and did that first in the Navy for 6 years, and then later settled down in Minden, Louisiana, where I practiced for many years and still have an active practice, and I do practice from time to time there. I love medicine, but became interested in business. I opened up, as you know, 32 Subway restaurants.
Wow.
In North Louisiana, and got into other things such as real estate, and really enjoyed that part of my career as well. But then became concerned about my country, as many people are today. It ran for Congress, served 8 years in Congress, then went to the Trump administration and served 4 years there, culminating as Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House, and really loved every minute of it. Working alongside President Trump was really an honorable thing that I was so privileged to have, and so happy to have served our nation that way. And then, of course, ran for this position I'm in today, which is state treasurer. And there have been a lot of challenges, but I think our state is really finally moving forward. And I'm happy to work with our governor and our legislature in order to accomplish that.
And you're doing a great job as treasurer. You've been really out there doing a lot of things we haven't necessarily seen from a treasurer before. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But I'm fascinated by the time you spent in the White House with President Trump. You've told me before you were just a few steps away from the Oval Office. I mean, how'd that work every day? Could you just walk down the hall and say, "Hey, Prez, how you doing today?"
No, it really doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
First of all, there's Secret Service men standing at each doorway to the Oval Office. So, no, you would have to go through a secretary who would have to clear you to get in. But it was not difficult access, and I would, have to pop in and mention something to the president, that a new development, because I didn't want him to get caught off guard, maybe by the media, ask him a question about something that he didn't know yet about. Those were all important things. And again, those were the pandemic days where things were happening fast every day, especially in healthcare. But got to spend some close time with him. My wife and I were invited one weekend to Camp David, among other people, and we got to have some sit-down time, dinner time, of course, with him. And he's a very charming man, very low-key speaking when he's in an intimate situation. So when you get to know him as a person, you really appreciate what a fine person he really is.
Well, and you mentioned that those were the pandemic days. Those were
Yes.
crazy days. And as a physician, you were kind of at the tip of the spear helping out, right?
Yes, I was the liaison in the White House to Operation Warp Speed. The scientists who were leading that reported to me once a week. And of course, I reported to the chief of staff and to the president and really the staff in general as to their progress. And as you know, in less than a year, we had a vaccine out. I know there's controversy about the vaccine because it's an mRNA vaccine, but most scientists tell us that millions of lives were saved as a result of the COVID vaccine. But like all vaccines, it's not without its potential side effects. And certainly anybody who's asked me about the vaccine, I've always told them they should consult with their personal physician to make a decision whether they should take the vaccine. It's certainly less necessary now because the virus has mutated to a much less lethal position, which is very good. But still, it can make you very sick even now. But also, I was a liaison for the 2020 census that was ongoing. It was a big challenge. The Constitution says that your enumerators have to be out in the field by April of the decennial year. And that was right at the peak of the pandemic.
Wow.
And so we didn't get them out until June. It was my responsibility to spend billions more dollars working with the Department of Commerce and the director of the Census Bureau to hire even more census enumerators than ever was imagined in order to catch up with that. We finally got it done with few delays, but we did run into some issues with the courts that didn't like us catching up because there were people out there who really didn't want President Trump to sign the census into law. So also I was on the coronavirus task force. I was there with Dr. Fauci once a week, meeting with the vice president in the Situation Room in the White House.
Well, let me interrupt you there. I'm sorry, but how was it working with Dr. Fauci? Because obviously he became a very controversial figure.
He did. The president relied on him, and the vice president relied on him completely. But his training was actually as an allergist. He was not a virologist. He wasn't an expert in that specialty. And just to give you an example, one day it was asked, this was early in the pandemic, hey, should we be wearing masks? Should we recommend to people that they wear masks? And he said, no, they don't work. And then a week later, he came back and changed his mind and said, not only should we be wearing masks, we should be wearing two masks. And but never really offering any scientific evidence of that and many other things. So I think, unfortunately, that Dr. Fauci loved the camera and the microphone way too much and didn't admit what really doctors and scientists should admit, and that is we don't know everything. There were things we did not know about this virus, and there was ultimately we learned in all of this we should have never closed the schools, we should have never closed the colleges, and really, frankly, should have never closed businesses, and certainly we should have never shut down and prevented people from going to church. These were all lessons learned.
Yeah.
And yet we had Dr. Fauci and others in his capacity that were recommending that somehow we could stop this virus by doing it. We couldn't. It was way too contagious.
Yeah.
And that's why I think if we have a similar pandemic again, I think we'll be much smarter about it.
Oh, that's good, because a lot of that stuff that you just mentioned was really unfortunate. I really feel for like kids that were seniors in high school at that time. I mean, they really lost a large part of their lives, right?
Children today are still undergoing therapy for the damage that was done to their lives, being isolated from their friends and in some cases, some relatives. It was totally unnecessary to do these things. Now, we didn't know for sure that we didn't need to close things down. So the president did begin that process. But you may recall it only went for about 6 weeks. it was the states that then began
Right.
to close things
Right.
down. And that happened in Louisiana, where, of course, Governor Edwards shut things down either completely or partially for months
Yeah.
on end. And again, that continued shutdown and isolation process was very damaging to people psychologically, and it certainly hurt our commerce.
Yeah.
Uh, and these are lessons learned. We should never do this again. Other countries like Sweden that did not do shutdowns came out as well, if not better, than we did at the end of the pandemic.
Let me talk to you about a little bit about your days in Congress before you went into the White House. You were a founding member of the Freedom Caucus, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Well, tell me how that
This
all
was
came about and what it means for the Congress.
Sure. Well, in the year 2014, I had been serving about 3-4 years. I was very frustrated, as were a number of my colleagues, because our Republican leadership, led by John Boehner, wanted us to go along with things that Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama, the president at the time, wanted us to do. And these were things that we thought were not good for the country. They were left leaning, and the beginning of some of the woke things. Having an agreement with Iran to allow them to continue to purify uranium
Right.
towards making a bomb. And when we departed from our leadership's position on voting, we were targeted oftentimes. And so ultimately, 9 of us came together. And in order to protect each other against retaliation from our own leadership, we created something called the House Freedom Caucus, which is very active today. But one of the first things the Freedom Caucus did after removing John Boehner as our speaker was when President Trump was attacked after taking office about Russian collusion and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
His defenders was the House Freedom Caucus. And as a result of that, the Freedom Caucus led the way to turn around on that lie. It was a lie from day one. And then, of course, the lawfare and then the impeachments that occurred later on. But the first defenders for President Trump was the House Freedom Caucus. And they're there today to push back on any type of movement by Republican leadership or Republicans in general to go along with some of the woke and left-wing policies that Democrats and socialists really want us to move in across the country in states, particularly like Oregon and California.
Well, and of course, one of the defenders on the president's defense team, that was a terrible phrase of a sentence, but
Yeah.
Mike Johnson was on that defense team. It's interesting now, obviously, he's the Speaker of the House, which is a big deal.
Yes.
And when you were sworn in as treasurer, right, if memory serves me, Mike came in and down to Louisiana and swore you in. Is that right?
Yes. He had been elected the Speaker of the House. And, Mike and I have been friends for years. I asked him to run in my place when I left my position as congressman for the 4th District. And he had been serving for that period of time since then. And I asked him to do me the honor to swear me in as state treasurer, and he did. And gratified to see Mike again and have the honor of his swearing in for me. So, yeah, these bonds are important. They're oftentimes lifelong bonds.
I just thought that was a cool moment. I didn't realize I was there covering the inauguration, and I didn't realize he was going to be swearing you in. So when he stepped up to do that, I was back in the back there in the cheap seats.
Right.
And that was really neat.
Yeah, funny story, though. At the last minute, he asked me if I had the actual swearing in words. And I realized that I've always depended on the person swearing me in to have that. And so neither one of us had the actual words, but we quickly found somebody who did, and we got it taken care of. But that was just a last minute thing that we had to do to be sure that everything went smoothly.
That's a fun story. We'll talk some more about some of these other things in D.C. and stuff in a few minutes, but you are now taking a turn another chapter in your political
Yes.
career. You are running for the United States Senate. Tell us about it.
Yes. You know, Jeff, I ran for the U.S. Senate back in 2016 while I was in Congress, while I was a congressman.
Right.
And that was the same year that John Kennedy ran. John Kennedy, ironically, was the treasurer and had run twice before for U.S.
Yep.
Senate. So I couldn't overcome his popularity and his name ID. But I think he's doing a great job for us. If I couldn't get elected, I'm glad he did. So then I went on, as you know, to serve in the Trump administration and then now as treasurer. But I've been very concerned, as many Louisianans have, that Senator Bill Cassidy has not really followed the values of Louisiana. He actually voted to convict Trump in the second impeachment trial, saying that President Trump was guilty. We know now factually that's not true. President Trump did not cause the J6 riot that occurred, the incursion into the Capitol. What happened was President Trump recommended 3 days before to General Milley, who was head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Nancy Pelosi, and Mayor Bowser, that they should put 10,000 troops around the Capitol because something could likely happen. Troops were already, and I'm talking National Guard troops here,
Yeah.
they were already around the White House, had been for over a year because of problems. And he recommended it, and they turned him down, said it was going to be bad optics. And so, unfortunately, what happened on January 6th was very unfortunate, but it was not President Trump's fault. But yet he got the blame by certain people, including Bill Cassidy. And but also, as I travel around the state, people tell me that Bill Cassidy has departed from our conservative Louisiana ways for years. He's drifted that way. He was a Democrat before he even got into politics, switched for political expediency to get elected to office, and I think grew comfortable and much more in his office that he could do what he wanted and really respond to his friends in Washington rather than the people who actually sent him to Washington, which is Louisiana voters. So we have two polls now, one which has been published that shows that if the election were held today, that I would win against Bill Cassidy, and others that maybe have been rumored to be in only registered really in single digits. So our campaign has really been growing rapidly. I've never had a campaign really take off this quickly after only 3 months of my announcement. And so far, nobody else has announced. And even Bill Cassidy himself has not officially announced that he's running for re-election.
Well, and you did announce pretty early, right? I guess that was to get the fundraising
Yes.
going.
Well, I announced on December 4th. There was no reason to delay any longer. It was clear that it was time for someone to step up. Louisiana wants a change in the office of U.S. Senate. And after consulting my family, I made the decision to move forward. So there was no reason to delay. And, a Senate race is a big race. It's really, in some ways, a nationwide race. And it takes a while to organize and build a team. And so there was no reason for me to delay. So I went ahead and announced on December 4th. Yes, fundraising is part of it. We're doing quite well in that as well. So, so far, everything's going well. We already have had an order for 600 yard signs, and we're expecting many, many more.
Well, this time around, you have great name recognition this time around, right?
Yeah, my name recognition is much higher than it was when I was a congressman. People knew me well within my district, but stepping outside of my congressional district, people didn't know me, of course. They didn't recognize me because all your contacts and your advertising for reelection all are within your district. Whereas as a treasurer, you're a statewide elected official. And remember, as I said, John Kennedy was the treasurer when he was elected to the U.S. Senate. Also, Mary Landrieu was state treasurer when she was elected to the U.S. Senate. So there is an advantage to being a statewide elected official, and it would seem being treasurer may even have an added advantage. There was a recent poll that came out that came across my desk that showed that that in states in general, that the treasurer or the financial lead official for that state holds the most trusted position in the state by voters. In other words, that they trust the treasurer in most states, and perhaps all states, not necessarily Louisiana, that wasn't chosen specifically. They trust of all the statewide elected officials, the treasurer is the one who's trusted the most. So that gives us obviously a platform in which to run for another statewide office, which is the U.S. Senate.
Well, I would say certainly Louisiana is a proof of that theory, based on what's gone on in the past from treasurer to the Senate, right?
Yeah, two of the last three senators elected to the U.S. Senate from Louisiana were treasurers.
That's pretty cool. Of course, John Kennedy, I don't know. This guy, he has I heard Sean Hannity ask him the other night if he actually really sat up at night and thought of all those phrases that he throws out there at the spur of the moment. And he claimed he didn't, but I mean, he is amazing, right, with those phrases he throws out.
Well, I think John Kennedy missed his calling. I think maybe he would probably be a multimillionaire today if he had gone into comedy.
I think so.
But somehow he's fused comedy with his position, of course, as a U.S. Senator. And so, whether it's spontaneous or it's practiced, I don't know, but he always seems to have the right quip at the right moment.
Well, you would be great as a member of Louisiana's congressional delegation. I've always been amazed, and I've only been around here about 10 years, but in the 10 years that I've been here, it's pretty amazing to me the outsized influence, I guess, that Louisiana seems to have in D.C.
For sure. And I think that's been common back through tradition in history, that we've had important places in the Congress and other places. But just for example, today, the Speaker of the House and the person just behind him, Steve Scalise, both are from Louisiana. So Mike Johnson, the Speaker, Steve Scalise, who is the majority leader, they're the two top people in the House of Representatives. I'm not aware that any state has ever had that position, the first and second position in the House of Representatives or in any other location. So it just goes to show you that Louisiana really takes government and politics very seriously. And we're fighting way above our weight class when it comes to politics and our representation in Washington.
As a United States Senator, if you were to win that position, what would you hope to accomplish?
Well, first, I would want to support the president in his initiatives. I agree with them. First and foremost is to get our economy up and going, and that involves tax cuts. And also we need to get trade back up and going, where we're exporting goods and we're bringing manufacturing and jobs back to the U.S., which were lost 25 years ago with NAFTA and other crazy ideas. And the president is busily doing that. Number two, we need to control our borders. If you can't control your borders, you have no borders, and therefore you have no country. And the president is doing that. We don't need additional laws, by the way, to control our southern border. That's always been a big lie of the Biden administration. We just need to actually enforce the laws that we have. And the president is busily doing that. As a physician, I opposed Obamacare for good reason. And the reason is that Obamacare there was not a word in that 3,000-page bill that dealt with the cost of care. All it did was shift the cost from one group of people to other groups of people. And that's what we have today, where you have more people in the wagon than you do pulling the wagon. And that's why your premium cost and your direct cost to your healthcare provider is so high, and the drugs are so expensive. Is there's nothing in law today that builds efficiency in healthcare We need to start with transparency of pricing, where regardless of the doctor or the hospital or the pharmacy you go to, you know exactly what you're going to pay and you can compare prices, where you get healthy competition among providers,
Yeah.
and that we have a system that really works for the patients and no longer works for the Fortune 500 companies that are making a bundle of money out of our healthcare system. So I want to see healthcare reform, but one that brings back the marketplace and fair trade, and really begins to make patients into consumers where they can choose based on
Sure.
price and quality of care, rather than this curtain that has all this information behind it that you really can't reach, and it's just guesswork, and all you can do
Yeah.
is pay the bills you get, even though you often you feel like you're being overbilled. And also prior authorization, where there's these nonsensical roadblocks that are thrown up by insurance companies when you
Yep.
need a procedure and yet it's denied, and no good reason is given. This is a big headache for doctors and patients alike. All of this needs to be swept away, and we need to have a responsive healthcare system similar to one that we had in past years,
Sure.
where patients are getting a good value for the money they pay for their healthcare.
No doubt about that. What are your thoughts on obviously tariffs are a big controversy right now. The president's imposing them. Since I was maybe eighth grade, I remember in civics class, but hearing about the United States always operated at this trade deficit, and they just allowed it to happen. And I always wondered, well, why? Was it we were just trying to get everybody to like us? Is that what the deal was? And now the president's trying to even the playing field, and it seems to be a huge controversy. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, beginning with the end of World War II, the only Western nation that was left standing with with a good economy was the United States. England was decimated, France was decimated, Germany, all of those Western nations were decimated. And so we took the leading role, both when it came to the military, fighting the Cold War against the Soviet Union, but also economically speaking. We took all that cost upon ourselves, certainly NATO and those costs. And we just started giving to countries, and then building big deficits, and growing our national debt. And it seems like that the more we gave things away to other countries, the more they hate us. And
Yeah.
so Trump has recognized that we're being taken advantage of, and have been for decades since World War II, and that we need to go back to America first. We need to take care of our own country and our own people first. And when it comes to trade, it's ridiculous how we've given up our manufacturing and our jobs to other countries only because they tariff us and we don't tariff them. So what he's doing is he believes in what's called reciprocal trade,
Right.
which is if you're going to charge tariffs on our exports, we're going to charge the same tariff on yours. And hopefully everybody agrees to stop tariffing at both ways. And so the country that can be the most efficient and build the highest quality in their services and products will win out on the trade. And everybody knows that the U.S. will win on that
Of course.
economically if it's fair and free trade.
Yeah.
So we can't give up fair trade in order to have free trade. We need both, and
Yeah.
that's where President Trump is coming in. And it's had a little downward pressure on the markets because it's disruptive. But ultimately, as in his first administration, what will happen is these countries will come into alignment, and they'll begin to work with us, and they'll bring down their tariffs as well.
We got just a couple of minutes left, and I hate to do this, but I want to talk to you about the debt. We're close to $37 trillion in debt, and that's why President Trump's doing some of the things he's doing, and Doge is doing what it's doing, because
Yes,
it's unsustainable if this country keeps going the way it is, right?
absolutely. Well, to give you the historical perspective, it took from George Washington to George Bush 43, the second George Bush, to build up $11 trillion in national debt. We've more than tripled that since President Obama took office.
Wow.
back in 2009. The doubling times are getting faster and faster. Now, the paying interest on our national debt is the number one line item in our budget. That is ridiculous. And there are just too many people in Washington that believe that we can keep doing this and nothing bad will happen. But it is unsustainable. There was a report the other day that only the massive offices in Washington along Constitution and Independence and so forth are only 6% occupied. And I suspect half of those are custodians. So
Wow.
if we don't need them in the buildings, how many of these people do we need at all? We see reports of people who've been paid for years and really had no work to do as government employees. And they're very, very well paid and have great benefits. So we're well overdue for DOGE.
Yeah.
And I've wondered for years how we would get to this place. And it sounds like President Trump has figured that out with Elon Musk. And it's time we do this. We've just got to go in and streamline our government and stop the wasteful spending. And we hear reports of all kind of ridiculous expenditures, that I won't even go into, but we know that they're unnecessary and wasteful. So I think this is a very good thing, and we're going to come out of it with, I think, a better government, and hopefully we'll start bringing down our deficits and hopefully our national debt as well.
Last minute here, if people are interested in your Senate candidacy, they want to get in touch, maybe donate a couple of bucks here or there, how do they get in touch with your campaign?
Yes. All you have to do is to Google Fleming for Louisiana, and that will take you to my website. You can also go to Fleming with one M, FlemingSenateCampaign.com. You can put that in one word, FlemingSenateCampaign.com, and you can donate there or learn more about me. You can see our polling data. You can see everything you want to see. You can also volunteer to work or volunteer for a yard sign, anything you would like. And we want to hear from you. You can also find a phone number on our website that you can call if you have questions or, again, you want to volunteer. So FlemingSenateCampaign.com, or you can, again, Google my name or Google Fleming for Louisiana. Either one will get you there.
So lots of ways to get in touch. No excuses not to. Listen,
yes, absolutely.
I could go another 2 hours with you. There's so many topics I wanted to get to that I didn't, but we've run up against the clock here. We'll do it again, okay?
I look forward to it, Jeff, always.
All right. State Senator John Fleming, a candidate for the United States Senate. Thanks for doing this, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay. State Treasurer.
What did I say? State Treasurer, my bad.
State Senator, State Treasurer, running for the U.S. Senate.
Correct, my bad. You know what? I should have said that your son is married to the daughter of the state senator, right? Alan Seabaugh.
That is true, Alan Seabaugh. So Alan Seabaugh and myself share 2 grandkids.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm getting old and addled. Sometimes I get my words mixed up. Thanks again, John. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you for watching.
You
bet. Thank you, sir. This has been The App. You can catch it on all the major podcast platforms, all the KTBS digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Have a good one, everybody.